Buckle your seatbelts, get your facepalm ready, get ready to watch some illegal shifting burden of proof, some magical pleading to magical fairy tales, some straw man mind reading, oversimplification, post hoc ergo proper hoc, all done by Dr. Frank Turdick. Pretty sure that's how you say his last name.
Atheists continue to emphasize that they just really lack a belief in God and they have no burden of proof to prove anything else, and that's really their position.
Yep, it's just that simple. Broadly speaking, most atheists have taken this position. Not all, but many. But so what? What's your problem with that? I don't believe in X, whatever X is, until it's proven to be a thing in the first place. The burden is not on me in any way, shape, or form to show why or how I don't believe in it. Nor is it your burden to show how and why you believe in any given thing, because burdens only become a thing when you say that there is or isn't something. So if I'm saying, well, I just don't believe in that, I don't have a burden. I know you don't like that, but that's how it is.
Is that a real helpful way of describing what they believe? And is that a real helpful way of having a conversation with somebody about ultimate issues?
This assumes that we are, in fact, talking about X, in this case, ultimate issues. But that's an assumption that you're making. That's not an assumption that I'm bringing to the table. Unless we are going to the table of discussion and debate to debate ultimate issues, I don't know that that's what we're necessarily debating about. Saying, oh, but we're debating about God, therefore we're debating about ultimate issues, well, that's something that you're attaching to God, that God is an ultimate issue. That's a burden that you have to support, that you have to prove. Show that God's a thing. Show that God's an ultimate issue. If you're able to do that, then fine. Then we are talking about ultimate issues. But I don't think that you're able to do either of those things. So I have no reason to believe that we are, in fact, talking about ultimate issues. As far as it being a good way to explain things, it doesn't matter whether you like the way it explains things or not. It is a way to explain a position. I don't believe in leprechauns. Very straightforward, very simple. It's not that complex.
Typically, when I debate an atheist, I don't debate the question, does God exist? Because that makes it seem like the theist has the burden of proof and the atheist doesn't have any burden of proof at all.
Here we go. Yeah, but that's the way it is, though. The theist does have the full burden to prove what they're claiming to be true is true. In this case, I would assume that you're talking about that God exists other than just in the minds of men as an idea. God's a meme as far as I can tell. It exists because humans came up with it, talked to each other about it, and write it down. God is completely, utterly silent on the issue if it actually does exist. So other gods that people stop believing in just cease to be. There's many, many gods lost to history. And there's a few that are old that people might still believe in, like Zeus, but there's very few followers of Zeus out there anymore. It's died out over time. It's just not something that people take seriously anymore. Yours is next on the chopping block. It's just going to take a while to get there. The only way that it survives is through people making it survive, because God hasn't said anything on the issue regarding any gods at all, past, present, and I doubt in the future either. And so I guess if you wanted to say that God was real, you'd have to also conclude that God doesn't care or doesn't have the power to show us which version of it is actually the correct one. And making excuses for why that's the case isn't interesting. What you need is an actual syllogism that supports your argumentation. What you need is to support your burden of proof. That you don't like to have this sort of debate kind of shows your hand a bit. The non-believer in any given idea must be convinced that that idea is true. And so the one proposing that idea must demonstrate that that idea is true. If they will not or cannot, then the doubter must continue to doubt.
What better explains reality? Is it atheism or is it theism?
Well, that's incoherent. One big giant red herring, shifting the burden of proof, and assumes a ton of things. You have to know by now, Frank, what the word atheist means. Whether you like what it means or not, it's irrelevant. Either it's lacking belief in God or it's just that there is no God. Either way, it doesn't say anything else. It is not a world view that says, here's how reality works. So the atheist has nothing there to put forth. There is no other thing that they need to explain about reality at all. Period. End of story. It is not the sort of thing that theism is. It is not the direct opposite of theism, and you should know that by now. Making this one giant incoherent statement because it suggests that atheism is some sort of worldview when it's not. It's a red herring. It's not talking about your burden of proof anymore. It's attempting to shift it to a slightly different but similar topic of like, well, how do we explain reality? Well, I don't know. That's a good question. Why are you asking me? I'm just a skeptic. I'm just an atheist. What do I know? Maybe you should talk to some scientists. That would be a good place to start. And of course, this is shifting the burden as well as maybe even a topic change because, again, it's not on us to explain anything about anything. That's not what it means to be an atheist. It's a descriptive, not a prescriptive term, and you have to know that by now. You're not an idiot, so I have to think that this is one ginormous straw man.
So it's quite clear that both debaters have to come to the debate and try and explain why reality the way it is, either from an atheistic perspective or from a theistic perspective.
Okay, maybe I spoke too soon. Maybe you are stupid when it comes to the word atheist because you would know that there is no atheist perspective. That's incoherent. It doesn't make any sense. Theism has a perspective depending on what theology you're talking about. But we are not in the same ballpark. Let me make an analogy. Maybe it will be easy enough for Frank and others that like Frank to understand. We find a pot of gold after seeing a rainbow. And it looked like the rainbow had an end, even though that's an optical illusion, but nonetheless, we found a pot of gold at what appeared to be the end of the rainbow. The rainbow's gone, but the pot of gold remains. Now, you make the claim, a leprechaun put this here. And I say, I don't believe in a leprechaun. Or I say, well, I don't even know what a leprechaun is, first of all. Or how do you know that a leprechaun put this here? And you say, well, you have to explain how this pot of gold got here. No, I don't. That's not my burden. I didn't claim anything about the pot of gold. Well, how do you make sense of it? It's not important how it's made sense of. That's not my burden to bear. It is your burden to bear. Period. End of story. That's how this works. You made the claim. You asserted that the pot of gold got there because of a leprechaun. You must demonstrate the leprechaun. You must demonstrate that the leprechaun is able to get a pot of gold to this particular location, and in fact did do that. If you are unwilling or unable to demonstrate any of that, I have no reason to believe in any of that. And it is not, repeat, not my burden to explain the pot of gold. Period. End of story. It's your burden. Full stop. We're not talking about the origin of the universe or how reality functions. We're not talking about physics or gravity or cosmology. We're not talking about any of that. in this debate that you don't want to have anyways, or this debate that you want shaped in such a malformed way that I'm surprised anybody would agree to debate you in the first place. We're not making the claim that we know how the universe came to be, or that we understand everything there is to understand about it. We're not making any claim at all regarding the universe / the pot of gold. We're saying we don't believe what you said is the cause of this, and you still have to prove that that's the cause of this. And I don't have to prove a damn thing about the universe / the pot of gold. So stop shifting the burden of proof. It's your burden to bear, not mine.
Sure, you can say that the other guy's explanation doesn't work, or the other guy's worldview doesn't work for whatever reason. But then you have to come forward and give your worldview and give your reasons for why reality the way it is. It doesn't help just to say, well, your explanation's wrong. Okay, let's say my explanation's wrong. What is the right explanation then?
So what you want to do here, Frank, is construct the outline of your debate to be coherent. So the topic of the debate would be, why is reality the way it is? Now, I'm not sure why an atheist would be the one to debate such matters, but okay, I'll take on the hypothetical atheist mantle and debate this particular topic with you. And sit down and say, well, okay, here's the presentation that you make. Maybe I'm going first. I don't know. We'll flip a coin to decide. Regardless, my intro is going to be very quick. I don't know why reality is this way. No idea. And I'm going to sit down. That's it. That's my answer. Don't know. It's interesting that it is this way. I have no idea why it's this way. And then you're going to make your presentation, and then I'm going to, during my rebuttal, show the logical fallacies that you made during that presentation and why we should be skeptical of everything that you've claimed. For then you to turn around and say, but you don't have an answer. Say, and? So what? I don't need to have an answer. I don't need to know what the answer is. Maybe we'll never know the answer. I don't have to offer an explanation. But it's like, but we're here to debate about reality and why it's this way. Right, and I already said why it's this way. I don't know. That's my answer. I don't have an answer. But that doesn't explain it exactly. But did I win? Nope. You didn't win because you didn't show that your side is true. I don't have to show that. I don't have to have a side. See, you're making the mistake that just because we don't know what the answer is, that we can't know what the answer is not.
Because in order for you to say that my explanation's wrong, you have to have at least some idea of what the right explanation is.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong.
In order for me to say that 2 + 2 does not equal 5, I have to have some idea of what the right answer is. Even if I don't have it specifically, I've got to have some idea. I have to have some reason to think it's not 5.
In mathematics, understanding the underlying structure of how math works in general would allow you to identify when you've got an answer wrong. But you might not know what the right answer is. Of course, 2 + 2 is too easy of a thing, I think. It's too readily available in our brains. So I don't think it's a good analogy. A better one that I've used is 1,000,000 to the power of 75. That's a huge number. I have no idea what it is off the top of my head. I'd have to use a calculator and whatnot to get to the answer. But I do know a lot of things about what it is not, because of the system of mathematics itself, and I understand those principles. It's going to be a very big number. It's not going to be a number that's smaller than the initial numbers I plugged in. It's not going to be a negative number. It's not going to have a decimal place. It's not going to be a fraction. There's a lot of things I can know about what it isn't without knowing what it is, because I understand the underlying structure. But we're not really talking about math. What we're supposedly talking about is the nature of reality itself. So what is our epistemology? How do we decide what's true? That we have to know. We don't necessarily need to know, oh my God, what is that? What reality is or how it functions to some precisionary degree, but we have to at least be able to show that our epistemology is valid and sound in some manner that makes sense of the things that we observe. So within the scientific method, you have all sorts of ways to demonstrate that that's true. Within the philosophical method, the only one that I know of in philosophy that has rules set is logic. So if that's what we're dealing in, then great, that's my cup of tea. I can deal with logic. There, you have failed to produce any burden of proof at all. You haven't demonstrated that your ideas are true, and so there's no reason to think that they are true. So I know at least that much about reality, that I know about logic, and therefore I can know that you're full of it and haven't produced any of it.
I mean, most atheists today are materialists. So if I ask an atheist, how do you support materialism? He may give me reasons he thinks support materialism. But if I just say, well, I lack a belief in materialism, I haven't refuted materialism at all.
Well, I don't know how many atheists are or are not materialists. I'd like to know where you're getting that idea from. Do you have any data on that? Citation? No. Of course he won't. But at any rate, let's say that this is the case, that an atheist says that they're a materialist, and that they then go on to give you a reason for why that is, and you say, well, I just don't believe in that. That's right. You haven't refuted it. You don't need to. All you need to do if you wanted to debate about materialism would be to show that the argument and or evidences put forth by the materialists are logically unsound and or scientifically impossible, improbable, or just not true in reality in some way, shape, or form. And that's it. That would be good reasons to doubt that their materialistic view was correct. That's all you need to do. You don't have to show that it's false. You just have to give reasons to doubt.
Rocks, trees, and animals are also atheists because they also lack a belief in God. Well, that's not really saying much.
So what? If that's the case, then that's what the case is. Appeal to consequence? Like, why would that matter? I don't care. Doesn't bother me. Now, I disagree that rocks would be in that category, or trees, because they don't really have brains, so they can't think at all, so they can neither believe nor disbelieve. But if you want to label them atheists, I don't care. They also don't believe in leprechauns. So, what's your point?
I mean, if you water down the word atheist that much, then it really loses most of its meaning. Because everything that doesn't believe in God would be considered an atheist then.
Again, appeal to consequence. So what? Who cares? How does that water down the meaning? That's interesting poisoning of the well. Why does this matter? Give me your syllogism.
But the other aspect to this is, if atheists are going to say they lack a belief in God, then why do atheists insist that God isn't needed to explain reality because of evolution, quantum theory, multiverses, whatever? You see, those are all positive beliefs. You don't need God because of evolution, or you don't need God because of quantum theory, or you don't need God because of the multiverse or whatever. Those are positive beliefs. You don't just lack a belief when you say those things.
No, because it might be the case that they do not believe in this thing because of these reasons. Now, you can say, well, those are positive reasons. Yeah, they're positive reasons to not believe. For example, we can take the leprechaun again. I can say that I don't believe in the leprechaun because I have plenty of other plausible explanations for the pot of gold. Maybe I have multiple explanations for the pot of gold, all of which would fulfill the requirements of explaining the pot of gold quite nicely without appealing to a leprechaun. And yet I don't believe in the leprechaun. Maybe you're saying, well, because you have those explanations that point away from the leprechaun, it's not that you just don't believe in the leprechaun, but you actually don't believe that the leprechaun is even possible. I didn't say that necessarily. I don't know. It depends. But since you're strawmanning so strongly against this hypothetical atheist who you're not in conversation with, it's hard to know exactly what your point is, if you even have a point. I think really all you're trying to do here is to derail the conversation that you're having with yourself to such a degree that your followers think, see those atheists, they say that they're one thing, but they actually are a different thing, and what's it matter at the end of the day? Maybe they don't believe, and maybe they are opposed to God, or maybe this, or maybe that. Why not just ask them? That's an idea. Stop trying to do this broad generalization of everyone into one little group that you can say, aha, this is what you think is true, and I can attack that. That's all you're really doing here, Frank. It's really disingenuous.
Let's forget Christianity if we're just going to have a conversation about reality. Let's just put that aside for a minute. You can throw holes or try and poke holes in it if you want. What is your explanation for why reality the way it is? That's what I want to know.
What is your explanation for why reality the way it is? That's what he said. Yep. I'm just going to leave that there for a moment. Let it sink in. Okay. I don't have an explanation, nor do I need one, but this is the question he wants to ask, and I guess the debate that he wants to be involved in? Ask scientists. I mean, they might have some ideas, but I don't know that we know why things are the way they are. I don't know that you know either. I don't believe your assertions regarding God explaining things, and even if I granted that, tentatively speaking, there would still be more questions to answer about God. Why is God the way that it is? There's going to be somewhere a question that cannot be answered by our own human limitations. Now, God could hypothetically answer these questions, but God's pretty quiet about those sort of things. In fact, God is so quiet that it seems that only humans are the ones that can say that God said anything. Interesting. But if that's not satisfying, you don't want the I don't know answer because you desperately want an answer, then I've got an answer. You're not going to like it though, but I do have an answer. Now, for those of you who have been subscribed to my channel a while, have watched my videos, I think you kind of know what my answer is going to be. Go ahead, leave your comment predicting what my answer is going to be. Did you do it? Don't wait for me to say it. Come on, you know what it is. Go on, write it down. Starts with an L, ends with an obster. Okay, good. That's my explanation. You really wanted one? Lobster. Well, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. That's the explanation. Read the Lobsterist. It's all in there. Now, why would you believe the Lobsterist? That's a good question. How do you explain it if you don't appeal to the Lobsterist? Oh, appeal to ignorance and personal incredulity. That's how. By shifting the burden of proof, I don't have to prove anything at all. You have to prove everything. You have to explain the reality as we know it. And if you can't do that to my satisfaction, then I'm going to be right. How about no to that? That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works at all.
If Michael Shermer and I consider ourselves detectives, we're trying to discover what the truth is, and we come across a murdered body, and I say, I think the murderer is this guy, candidate X. And Michael Shermer, the atheist, says, well, no, I don't think candidate X is the right guy. I lack a belief that candidate X is the murderer. And I say, okay, you lack a belief that candidate X is the murderer. That's who I think it is. Who do you think it is? And he goes, oh, well, I don't have to come forth with any suspect here. I just lack a belief that your suspect is the true murderer. Would he be a good detective if that's all he did?
Bravo! A+ for Poisoning of the Well. The best Poisoning of the Well I've heard maybe ever. So, good job. Yay. Empty victory to you, Frank. Okay, so, we're not detectives, and it's not analogous. But, you know what? You brought this up, so we'll just stick with it. Let's go back a little bit and make it closer to what's really happening. You and I are both detectives, and we found a dead body in an apartment, and you say that a ghost did it. And I say, do what now? Oh, it must be a ghost, you explain. You see, the door was locked. Both sides. There's no way to get in or out. It wasn't a suicide because the person had wrote how awesome life is. They have all these things saying that. It couldn't be a suicide. And besides that, I don't see any obvious way that they could kill themselves. The windows are barred. There's no way in there. It must be a ghost. Only a ghost could have gone under the door or through the cracks in the windows and gotten in here and killed this person. At which point I say, no, I don't believe that. Oh, well, fine. Well, what is the answer? I don't know. But sure hell ain't ghost. Now, let's look for some evidence to find, if we can figure out what the murderer is. But before I'm allowed to do that investigation, you're like, hold on. If you don't believe that it's a ghost, you have to show that it's not a ghost. No, I don't have to show. Well, but you have to understand the underlying nature of reality here. No, let's just do the investigation. No, wait a minute. Now you're doing a positive claim that it can't be a ghost because of this and that explanation. So it's not that you just don't believe in the ghost, it's actually that you believe there is no ghost. And I just want to investigate the scene. No, wait a minute, we're not done yet. I mean, I'm gonna make a podcast and then I'm gonna strawman and poison the well and do all these other logical fallacies until you admit that you just hate the ghost. That's why you just hate the ghost. What? Okay, you know what? I'm going to ask for a new partner at this point and actually try to do some detective work. You can't do the detective work? How do we even know that the detective work even works? Without the ghost, we can't make sense of detective work. Wait, what? And so on it goes. So that would be closer to what's happening. Is the other person, they might in fact have an idea of the suspect. It's not a ghost. Maybe they don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, but so far it's looking like it wasn't a person at all. There was no agent involved, that this was an accident that happened, that there's an explanation for the accident, there's physics involved, but the underlying explanation of that explanation might be a mystery. But nonetheless, they have some idea. But now you're too wrapped up in insisting that they believe, they don't believe, they lack a belief, they must not believe, they have this burden, that burden, that you are forever trapped in asserting that it has to be the ghost because it can't not be the ghost. Because the moment it's not that ghost, the belief of the ghost vanishes. And it doesn't reappear again because we don't need it as an explanation. In fact, maybe we never needed it as an explanation in the first place. But maybe you were raised with the ghost. Maybe the ghost makes you feel good inside. Maybe your brain just likes the idea of the ghost. But we're never going to find out the truth of the matter if you keep insisting that it's the ghost and you keep denying that it could possibly be anything else. For we've found some of the hints at who the culprit is to this murder, or in fact, maybe it's not even a murder, because it seems that would imply there was intent, and actually we've discovered There's reasons to doubt that there was any intent behind this. So it is you who is preventing the detective agency from moving on, not I. But still, A+ for poisoning the well there. Good job.
The evidence from science seemed to be strongly suggesting, if not nearly proving, that the universe had a beginning. If it had a beginning, if space, matter, and time had a beginning, what caused that? Seems to me, if space, matter, and time had a beginning, the cause has to be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, and intelligent.
Well, you've jumped from half of the Kalam cosmological argument straight into a square circle. That's pretty impressive. Spaceless, timeless is incoherent. There's no when, there's no where. That's what it would mean to be spaceless and timeless. But the reason why you say that this is your answer is because that's how you have framed your God to be. A spaceless, timeless thing that's something beyond or above or atemporal or whatever. However you want to frame it, that where you try to make sense of it. I don't know that it has to be the opposite of the thing that we're looking at. This is an assumption that theists make when they're doing this particular apologetic. Why can't it be the same thing? We don't know. But here's the thing. When you believe that it must be X, and it can't not be X, because that's really the problem with God, is it can't not be God. God has to be there somewhere. You have to shove God there somewhere if that's your ultimate explanation for everything. So even if we came up with the answer and said, well, it's this, Flingimon. That's what did it. And this Flingimon just, that's what did it all. And, well, but what made the Flingimon? It's just, there is nothing. It's just always been. Well, but doesn't it has a mind, right? No, it's just there. That's it. That's what did it. For the theists, they're going to always put God before that. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't be a theist anymore. They wouldn't be a believer anymore. Now, not all, because some say, well, God doesn't have to be that sort of thing where I fit it in to cram it into the spaces of the unknown. That I don't have to say that God has to be X, Y, and Z. Maybe I can figure out what God actually is. Maybe God is the phalange. That's what it is. And that's fine. Maybe that's very different from what I thought God was, but okay. I'm going to accept that. Because that's what reality is presented to me as being the case. A skeptic can do that. An atheist can do that. An agnostic can do that. Somebody that doesn't have a pre-decided belief structure of what the answer must be can accept what the answer actually turns out to be. The theist cannot do that.
Okay, well, what's the atheist explanation for that? You just can't say, well, I lack a belief in God. You've got to give a reason why this universe could exist in the absence of someone like God, a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent creator.
If we were to try to explain how things work, we would do so with a system that is shown to be consistent, reliable, testable, observable, that makes predictions, that can be corrected, that can be changed over time. Theology is none of those things. It resists correction. It resents change because it relies heavily upon tradition. Although Christianity and Catholicism and all the other theologies out there have to adapt in order to survive, the process by which they adapt is extraordinarily slow. Many churches have torn asunder with members debating over minutiae, like whether or not you should play stringed instruments. But a much more important issue of how one is saved can also divide a church. If your own religion can't decide how you are saved, I think that that's a problem of the system. Although you might blame that on humans, you haven't fixed the system. Theology is unlike science. It doesn't adapt. It doesn't come to a single unified agreement upon anything. It only produces more disagreement. There is no way to interpret the Bible. There are several ways to interpret the Bible. That's why there's so many different translations and why there's so many different denominations. And they'll use the same verses that you could use just in different ways to justify their beliefs. And there is not a way to make that point to a single unified answer. Even the Catholic Church can't do it. They've split amongst themselves and, of course, ultimately split into the Protestant that's now just Christian these days. Because Christian usually now refers to Protestant more than Catholic, even though they're both Christian. Go figure. That's just how words change over time. And so it's possible to have a system where everything always is the same. But it's very difficult when your book is as long as it is and as vague as it is on many points and as boring as it is in other points. Which just speaks to humans doing it and not a divine being. But you could devise a book that was short and simple and easy to understand and that nobody was confused about and that everyone agreed upon, and that still wouldn't show that it was divine. You could have a system where everyone agreed, and that still wouldn't make it divine. Scientology does pretty darn well at having everyone agree on the system. And if you try to use something from Scientology outside of it, they don't like that at all, and they'll try to shut you down. They're more like a cult than they are a religion. But when does religion cross over into cult? It's hard to say. The controls that most religion has upon its users is less than it used to have, and as time goes on that will only decrease, and religion will have to change and morph to fit humanity. It is not theology that has predicted anything or helped us to understand anything. It is science that has done those things. It is logic that has guided us to where we are. Now, you might say that theology can answer the why, but it can't really even answer that because the why is answered in 20 billion different ways. Which one is the actual why? Well, as long as one of them happens to be right, that might be good enough for you, but it's not going to be good enough for the skeptic. Rather than relying upon theology to explain anything, why not try this epistemology? If you have empirical evidence and/or a repeatable test, in other words, if you have the scientific method to be able to be used on the given phenomenon, then you can be pretty sure that it's a real thing. If you don't have that for some reason, or it's inaccessible to you, then at least you should have a valid and sound argument. And if you don't even have that, then you probably should be skeptical of the conclusions. I worked in my end thing there pretty well. I mean, I could have been... Are we still recording? No, turn it off!